Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all of you joining us today in this special T20 Handover event from Italy to Indonesia, T20's contribution to G20 recovery initiatives. My name is Sima, and I'll be hosting you throughout this event. This handover event is held virtually and is broadcasted at CSIS Indonesia YouTube channel. In this special occasion, we thank you for the time given to us. We appreciate all the distinguished speakers and audience who join us in this event. Before we begin, however, we just received a saddening news this afternoon that Professor James Megan has passed away. We would like to extend our deepest condolences to his families and friends. We acknowledge his tremendous contribution to the T20 community, and we will always remember his legacy. I would like to invite everyone to take a moment of silence in our tribute to Professor James Megan. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are very grateful of Professor James Megan's contribution to this community. Now, let's continue with our handover agenda for tonight. This handover event is jointly initiated by the T20 Italy and T20 Indonesia, co-organized by the Institute for International Political Studies, ISPI, Center for Strategic and International Studies Indonesia, CSIS Indonesia, and Institute for Economic and Social Research, Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia, LPM FEB UI. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, before we start the event, let me share briefly about the T20. The Think 20, or better known as the T20, is the official engagement group of G20, bringing together leading think tanks and research centers worldwide. The T20 role is indispensable, offering research-based policy recommendations to the G20 leaders. The T20 is committed to provide innovative ideas and evidence-based policy recommendations at the current affairs where we witness uneven economic recovery, the rise in inequality, and global frictions that call for global coordinated actions. T20 has become ever more important. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two objectives in tonight's event. Firstly, to officially hand over the T20 from T20 Italy to T20 Indonesia, and secondly, to introduce the T20 Indonesia and its agenda. Now, to begin the session, I would like to invite the chair of the T20 Saudi Arabia, the Honorable Mr. Fahad M. Al-Turki, to give his remarks. Mr. Al-Turki is the Vice President of Research at King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, CAPSARC, and was the chair of the T20 Saudi Arabia in 2020. In his role at the CAPSARC, he oversees its research programs and priorities and ensuring that these are strategically focused on impacts within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, both regionally and globally. He has a proven track record in economics with more than 20 years of experience in the field. Mr. Al-Turki, pleased to have you this evening. The screen is yours, sir.
Thank you, Sima, for the nice introduction, and I would like to thank the organizers for having me this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's indeed an honor to be addressing this handover event and joining you all in celebrating the transition from T20 Italy to T20 Indonesia. There is no doubt that T20 Indonesia team will be looking forward to a year of hard but also rewarding work, close collaboration, and productive dialogue. The T20 throughout the years continues to go from strength to strength with each passing year. And I'm very much looking forward to witnessing the T20 Indonesia's accomplishments in the year ahead. When I chaired the T20 Saudi Arabia, our vision was to create a future of prosperity, sustainability, and inclusion. Central to our work was furthering the prospects of youth and women, as well as highlighting the role of digital technology to achieve the vision's 3 pillars. We also reaffirmed the necessity of multilateralism and the key role of international organizations to overcome existing shared global challenges. especially on the onset of COVID-19 as a backdrop back in 2020 and still continuing to be the case. We also highlighted the need for a circular recovery from the pandemic. We advanced the carbon economy to support climate action and balancing the challenges of food, water, and energy sustainability. The onset of COVID-19 caused us to rethink many of our plans, and I'm still proud of what we achieved despite the disruptions for both the T20 Saudi Arabia as well as what's been achieved under the T20 Italy. Both T20s were incredibly productive, producing more than 100 policy briefs reflecting the main challenges that are facing our global community at current time. And we consolidated these policy briefs into communiques to the G20 leaders. During the Saudi T20 presidency, we also issued over 15 statements ranging from reskilling employees for the future work and social development to statements on the circular carbon economy to meet global climate challenges. There is no doubt that these statements, as well as the continuity under the T20 Italy, helped underline relevance of the T20 as the ideas bank of the policy community. During the T20 Saudi Arabia, we argued for more continuity between successive T20 years, as well as for strengthening the legacy issues and for more representation of non-G20 countries in the T20 process. I'm very pleased to see that the T20 Italy has managed to progress on these issues further. It is my hope that the Indonesian presidency will continue to work on developing this continuity practice. I was delighted during this year to help develop the policy recommendations for Task Force 11 on reforming the T20. This was something that I was keen to be involved in following T20 Saudi Arabia. It is an important area of focus that will help the forum, the T20 forum, become more inclusive, impactful, and transparent, as well as enhance its continuity across successive years. A key focus here that the Task Force 11 looked at is enabling a greater degree of participation from Global South, strengthening policy proposals at specific stakeholders, and differentiating between memo-style policy briefs and think pieces to make sure that the communication with the policymakers is more effective. I would be very pleased to see the Indonesian presidency continue to build on the work we have achieved during the T20 Italy year. The COVID-19 pandemic is still placing a substantial strain on global effort to achieve many international policy goals, including climate change, social cohesion, economic growth, and financial stability. The world is facing many different and unprecedented challenges, including rising inflation, supply chain disruption, and the urgent need to vaccinate large proportion of the global population, despite 2 years of the pandemic. It is against this backdrop that I hope T20 Indonesia maintain the T20 tradition of producing timely research and evidence-based policy recommendations for the G20 decision maker. The relevance of the T20 to the global policy community has only increased during the pandemic, and it is important that the think tank community comes together to help strengthen global institutions. I wish the international coordinators of the T20 Indonesia, both the Institute of Economic and Social Research at the University of Indonesia and the Center for Strategic and International Study, the greatest success in executing what I believe will be an extraordinary T20 year. T20 leadership next year will, I'm sure, use their tremendous expertise as well as their international network to enable the T20 Indonesia to rise to the many challenges currently facing our global community as well as policymakers. Thank you very much for listening, and back to you, Seema.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Turki, for sharing your valuable insights from the T20 Saudi Arabia. I'm sure that T20 Indonesia could learn a great deal from these valuable experiences that you just shared. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will now turn to Professor Paolo Magri, National Coordinator and Chair of T20 Italy, who will deliver a remark presenting some key highlights from the previous T20, which just successfully concluded its leadership. Professor Magri is the Executive Vice President of the Italian Institute for International Political Studies and a Professor of International Relations at Bocconi University. He is a member of the Strategic Committee of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, a member of the Euro Policy Group of the World Economic Forum, and a member of the Board of Directors of the Italy-China Foundation. He is also a member of the scientific committees of the Elcano Royal Institute, the Center of Excellence for Stability Policy Units, and of the Military Center for Strategic Studies. With that, I would like to hand the screen over to Professor Magri. The screen is yours, sir.
Thanks, Biondi. Allow me, before we get into the handover, 2 words on Jim McGann. This is a very sad day for me, sad for ISPI, sad for the think tank community. I lost a friend, not always easy to deal with, as often with real friends. And we all lost a source of inspiration in our work in the think tank community. But the show must go on. And after a demanding but exciting year, it's time for ISPI to pass the T20 torch to our Indonesian friends and colleagues of the Institute of Economic and Social Research of the University of Indonesia and of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. But let me keep the torch just for a few minutes more to share with you, as Biondi just mentioned, some lessons learned during our year-long journey. And I will focus on the 2 major goals of T20 Italy, the 2 major goals of many T20. First and foremost, as the ideas bank of the G20, the T20 needs to provide research-based and actionable policy recommendation to the leaders. And second, it needs, as Fahad mentioned, to be inclusive and engage a broad audience with a view to effectively disseminating T20 results. On point 1, policy recommendation, the key question is, do we really have a direct impact on G20 political leaders? We have to be honest, and we need to keep our feet on the ground and be aware of the often limited influence the T20 can exert on the G20. This is true also for other engagement groups. We know this, but this cannot let us down. Over the last year, as also Fahad and other T20 chairs did in the past, we have tried hard to have our voice heard. How? In the Italian T20, we strived to synchronize, whenever possible, our work with the G20 schedule. First, by keeping in touch with the G20 Sherpa and the finance track, then by having some of our 90 gender and geographically balanced co-chair participating in key G20 task forces. And then by producing 10 official statements, also in partnership with other engagement groups, days before each ministerial meeting. Was this effort worthwhile? Which policy proposal of the T20 Italy and previous T20 have been translated into commitments at the G20 summit in Rome? Actually, there is some degree of convergence in a number of policy areas, even if we have to admit that our ambition remains in many respects unfulfilled. Here are some positive examples. On global health, the G20 endorsement of the One Health approach is in line with our recommendation. On debt, the G20 commitment to extend the debt service suspension initiative goes in the direction supported by the T20 to escape the fate of a new financial crisis. However, these measures are too limited in time and scope. And what is going to happen next year when it expires? And what if the Fed starts raising interest rates later in 2022 or 23? On recovery policy, the T20 had suggested a significant issuance of new IMF special drawing rights. And an unprecedented 650 billion issuance is now a reality. But again, we have to be honest with ourselves. Only 3% of the new SDRs went to low-income countries and around 30% to middle-income countries. For now, it's not really a game changer for them. On the green transition, my last point, in line with previous T20 proposal, a G20 working group on sustainable finance was created, and leaders promised to provide developing countries with 100 billion per year until 2025. But again, we have to be honest and frank with each other. This promise exists since 2009, and so far, only 63 billion per year have been mobilized. Not to mention our calls for much stricter targets to phase out fossil fuel subsidies. All in all, some of our proposals were at least partially turned into reality. And we hope that the next T20 presidency will keep pushing on G20 leaders for their full implementation. Other ambitious T20 proposals were not taken into consideration at all. They include, among others, the introduction of a global citizen income, a wealth tax on corporation stocks as a means to address inequality, and many others. Now, let me spend the last minute to move to the second goal of the T20. What did we do to better engage and disseminate? Over the last year, we have tried hard to fully engage the global community of think tanks, often with Jim McGann, but also other stakeholders, international organization, non-governmental organization, business community, in all our events, the Inception Conference, 20 Roundtable, 3 high-level forum, the G20 Global Policy Forum, and the T20 Summit in October. These efforts allowed us to reach out to a global audience of 9 million people. Looking at 2022, ISPI will be glad to contribute to the Indonesian T20, as our Saudi friends did with us, with the same generosity and with the same commitment. And I'm really pleased to announce that we are already working with T20 Indonesia to hold the second edition of the G20 Global Policy Forum next June, also with a view to discussing preliminary results of the T20 policy brief. So let me conclude with the same words I used at the T20 summit. This is the end of the Italian T20 journey, but this is the beginning of the journey of our ideas. I'm sure the T20 Indonesia, supported by lessons learned in previous presidency, also by our task force on reforming the T20 that Fahad mentioned, I'm sure T20 Indonesia will carry them forward and deliver on the motto, recover together, recover stronger. I'm now really honored to hand over to the T20 presidency to Bambang and to Disman. And now that the T20 torch is in very good hands, good luck to you and count on us. Let me turn to Biondi again.
Thank you so much, Professor Magri, for delivering your insights from the T20 Italy experience We are hopeful that the team here at the T20 Indonesia could continue the excellent progress made by the T20 Italy, providing evidence-based recommendations to G20 leaders and to continue disseminating and engaging with the community and public at large to push for progressive reforms. Now, before we continue the handover event and to commemorate the success of T20 Italy, I would like to invite all of us to watch a video highlighting the T20 Italy. Please have a look. And now let us begin the countdown to mark the handover from T20 Italy to T20 Indonesia. All right, that video represents the handover from the T20 Italy to the T20 Indonesia, marking the beginning of the T20 Indonesia's chairmanship. Ladies and gentlemen, starting from 1 December 2021, which is tomorrow, by the way, the T20 Indonesia will start the writing process of the policy recommendations for the G20 leaders. We are confident that Indonesia will drive the discussion progressively to answer the challenges of our present time and enable evidence-based but also practical policy formulation to be presented to the world leaders across G20 member states. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that all of us here are eager to know what are the top agenda and priorities that will become the main focus of T20 Indonesia's team. To learn more about just that, we will shortly begin a talk show with the T20 Indonesia lead co-chairs, Professor Bambang PS Brojonegoro and Professor Jisman Simanjuntak. And for that, I would like to invite the Honorable Mr. Antonio Villafranca to be the moderator of the talk show session. Mr. Villafranca was the T20 Italy coordinator at ISPI and is currently serves as ISPI's Director of Research. To Mr. Villafranca, you may please have the screen.
Thank you very much, Biondi. It is really a pleasure for me to chair the first actually roundtable in the context of T20 Indonesia with the two co-chairs, with the two chairs of T20 Indonesia. So without further ado, I want to go straight to the point and raise the first question to one of the two chairs of T20 Indonesia, to Professor Jisman Simanjuntak. Professor Simanjuntak is a senior economist and chair of the board of directors at the CSIS Foundation. So Professor Simanjuntak, global economy is marching into the new shape of the post-COVID world economy. What are the most pressing issues that need to be addressed in the recovery process in the short term, and what agenda should be built for the longer run? Please, Professor.
Thank you, Antonio. First of all, our gratitude goes to T20 Italy and T20 Saudi Arabia for entrusting to us such a very good agenda to follow. Now to your question, which is a very difficult question. Our economies are all mobility-based economies. We can do almost nothing without mobility. And COVID has restricted our mobility to a very large extent. And I think fighting COVID will continue to be a very high item on our agenda. And it is also going to be one of the top priorities of G20 under Indonesian presidency. And in saying this, I pay attention, of course, to continuity, but also to innovative elements in the recommendations of T20 to G20. But we cannot wait forever to push recovery in our economies. Millions of people have lost employment, have lost income, and recovery is a must. So key question is, how do we recover under the COVID constraint, particularly when we have this new variant of Omicron spreading worries around the world? We will have to live with it. And it is called risk-based recovery. And I think with smart risk management, we can still expect to recover despite COVID. And in fact, all institutions have projected a much better performance for 2021, though a slight slowdown for 2022, and hopefully the arrival of this Omicron will not create too much of damage to the recovery. So recovering with risk management, health and recovery come together. We need both. There is no doubt about it. But the instruments that we have been relying on for the last 2 years in maintaining recovery in our economies are apparently stumbling on limits. Inflation has become a worry in many economies. So we T20 will have to think aloud of how we can continue, I create a concerted recovery, not the same formula for each G20 economies, but each with its own formula, but somehow concerted in nature. We need this to maintain a certain speed of economic recovery in the G20. And lastly, I think, in connection also with sustainability development, we need to push investment, and this is very clearly illustrated in the video about T20 Italy, large-scale investment in renewables and other forms of decarbonization. Some economists have in fact made a great deal of progress in transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable. And China also has been doing greatly in that area, but the same also applies to Europe. And I think lessons from this can be brought over to the rest of the world, including T20. There is also one important idea from Indonesia, policy idea, large-scale reforestation as a way of capturing carbon. Millions of hectares of land lie fallow in some islands in Indonesia, and I think reforestation can contribute a lot to decarbonization. So finding a sensible mix between fighting COVID-19 and economic recovery will be a challenge not only to T20 Indonesia, but to all of us. And I think T20 Saudi Arabia and T20 Italy have shown us the way to go for the next 12 months, the next year in 2022. That's my first comment, Antonio.
Thank you very much, Professor Simanjuntak. Let me turn now to the other chair of T20 Indonesia. I'm glad to see you again, Professor Bambang Brojonegoro, who is Professor of Economics at the University of Indonesia, and is also former Minister of Finance and Minister of Development Planning of Indonesia. So, Professor Brojonegoro, in addressing the short and long-term issues which Professor Simanjuntak just mentioned, which aspects need to be considered and integrated into the high-level discussion of global leaders of G20, for instance, when it comes to inclusivity, sustainability, and so on? Please, Professor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Antonio. I think we have altogether witnessed the evolution of G20 from crisis response group, especially after global financial crisis 2008, into an agenda setting forum. That's actually happening on the last G20s prior to the pandemic. So, of course, at the beginning, especially after 2008, most of the discussion in G20 and also other working group or engagement group will be focusing on the stability of global financial system and the needs to enhance, for example, financial sector supervision, as well as better communication among advanced economies. Let's say most of them are G20 members. But then now we have the pandemic, and pandemic, of course, has to be classified also as a kind of the global disaster, like what happened in 2008. The difference is, of course, this type of crisis is more on the economic crisis, and then the mobility, physical mobility especially, is very much limited or restrained during this pandemic. As a result, every country in the world, no exception, has to face, I think, one of their worst economic crises, especially by the negative economic growth. So for this G20 Indonesia, as well as our T20, the challenge would be, at the same time, we are back to the crisis response discussion, crisis response forum. But in this case, of course, crisis because of the pandemic rather than crisis because of the collapse in the financial sector. And at the same time, we have to continue as an agenda setting forum. What kind of agenda? Of course, we are talking about the agenda that becomes the main discussion prior to the pandemic, namely climate change, namely digital transformation, and also collaboration in international transparency, especially in taxation. So, of course, those issues will be part of our T20 Indonesia. And when we are talking about climate change, for example, the emphasis on climate change, I believe now is much greater than before. People start realizing all over the world that climate change is for real. We already experience the bad impact of the climate change here and there, and of course in different ways in majority part of the world. And when we are talking about digital transformation, actually digital transformation could be a solution. And this is very interesting case, because at the same time we are worried about possible negative impact of the digital transformation, but at the same time we can identify digital transformation could be a solution, especially life after pandemic or the recovery process after the pandemic. So combination of digital transformation and climate change certainly will be the main topics. But don't forget, we still also have the global agenda, namely Sustainable Development Goals. Of course, it is much related to the climate change and digital transformation, but now we are facing, I think, tough challenge in achieving SDG 2030, because this pandemic clearly, make some efforts has to be reduced, or some goals could be unachievable by 2030. And certainly the financing for achieving SDG itself must be very much increasing. So those are the challenges that we are trying to accommodate in our agenda, both as a short-term goal, especially talking about economic recovery per se, but also in the long term. For example, how can we live with zero carbon emission in the future? How can we live with revolutionary digital transformation that might change totally our life, in the near future? So, Antonio, I believe those are the agendas that should be part of our main subjects during Indonesia's T20.
Thank you very much indeed. So now I have a final question, but for both the Indonesian chairs, and it regards specifically the role of the T20, which is, as we know, the ideas bank of the G20. So what role could the T20 play to promote and elevate the agenda of stronger inclusive recovery to the discussion table of the G20? Maybe we can start with Professor Simanjuntak, please.
Thank you, Antonio. I am old enough to witness the very fundamental nature of inequality facing us around the world. I remember the UN-based G77, with such a huge agenda, but very little came out of it. Inequality is deeply rooted, very deeply rooted. And as economists, I tend to attribute it to unequal access to progress in science and technology. Science and technology in all fields of life. And I think we T20s are challenged to come up with ideas on how to deal with this unequal access to science and technology. Digital technology is only one. Genome editing technology is another one, which is going to play a very important role in agriculture, food security, in human healthcare, and many other things. So, enabling people around the world to access progress in science and technology more evenly, to me, is the litmus test of development. And we, think tanks around the world, are challenged to come up with good ideas. to dwell on issues like intellectual property rights. I think we need reform in that area. Human development. So the fact that the government of Indonesia has elevated access to digital technologies as one of the top priorities in G20 agenda, I think is very sensible. We will get almost nowhere unless this issue is addressed. The role of T20, but also think tanks in general, both in the origination of policy ideas and in the dissemination of policies ideas. As Paolo mentioned just now, we can only exert very limited influence on G20. We know how the process proceeds. Very limited influence, even though we will continue to try through cooperation with Sherpa initiated works. I don't know whether it is possible or not, even to approach to the leaders, if possible at all. Who knows? I like what Paolo said on this. Yeah, we should not be discouraged, even though our current influence is limited. So both in the origination of policies ideas and in the dissemination. Through dissemination, we will slowly build up communities of policies ideas, public education, and I think any think tank is also responsible for sharing policy ideas to a wider stakeholders. And we know how fundamental all the problems are. Many people are calling for resetting, Antonio. Resetting, not just tinkering, resetting in many ways, including macroeconomic policy making. Can we possibly address the very fundamental problems of inequality, sustainable development, bio-friendly lifestyle, shift in the global economy toward Asia? Can we possibly address those issues if we are not able to bring up new ideas, new policies ideas? And I think T20 Indonesia, in cooperation with fellow members of T20, but also with the rest of the think tank communities, can at least seek to mobilize new policies ideas and help disseminate of those ideas to a much wider stakeholders. Maybe we will not be able to match Italy with 9 million reach out, but we will try also our best. And I think close communication with the Sherpa track, probably also with the finance track, can allow us to have some influence, however small, some influence on policy making in the very difficult areas. So I agree with Paolo. We should not be discouraged. We have been doing our works all along in the recognition that our influence is limited, but we keep doing it keep doing it. And I think T20 offers us a great opportunity for doing so. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you very much, Dishman. So, Bambang, please.
Yeah, I think as a provider of research and evidence-based policy recommendation, especially for global leaders of G20, the T20 could play a significant role during this recovery period, meaning that the recovery after the pandemic should reflect substantial economic reform. And why why it's different with the recovery after 2008 global financial crisis? Again, we have, of course, different issues prior to the pandemic in 2019, 2020 compared to the period of 2008, 2009. And of course, when we trying to learn the difference, of course, some of the issues coming from the development issues. That's why, as a T20 president this time, Indonesia, as part of developing our emerging economy, we also focus on some developing countries specific issues, for example, poverty issues, as well as infrastructure financing issues. And we hope our experience and of course our sharing about those issues can also translate into other parts of the world. But of course, we are not talking about just developing countries issues. We are still talking about the global issues. And that's why I think promoting sustainable promoting sustainable and inclusive recovery will be the main theme of our activities that will be represented by 9 task forces. Aside from that, of course, we would like to leverage the digital transformation, and not only about the technology, but more importantly about the benefit of digital transformation to the society. And of course, we hope that the T20 can lead the use of more benefiting digital forum for society in general. Last but not least, reviving multilateralism. Of course, we have discussed multilateralism in the past, mostly, of course, in the issue of international trade and sometimes international finance. But this time around, because of the pandemic, multilateralism is also on the development cooperation, especially when we are talking about vaccine distribution around the globe. And I think this is the topic that maybe never touched before, because we never, pay attention enough to the health sector. But now we realize that in order to be strong against pandemic, countries cannot work only by themselves. Even they cannot work only by having the regional cooperation. They need to have global cooperation. And part of that has to be supported by multilateralism. So we hope that the 9 task forces that we already developed for T20 Indonesia could answer, of course, not all questions, but majority of the question, and hopefully we could provide a good research and evidence-based recommendation to our leaders, especially during the G20 summit Indonesia sometimes in October.
Thank you very much, Bambang. Thank you very much, Dishman. It was really a pleasure. As Paolo said before, definitely the T20 torch is in very good hands. So my best luck, of course, to T20 Indonesia. Now I get back to Biondi. Please, Biondi.
Thank you so much, Antonio. And thank you, Professor Bambang and Professor Jisman, for such an enlightening discussion and for sharing us your thoughts on Indonesia's top priorities and agenda moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, before we continue tonight's event and to excite us further of the T20 Indonesia's chairmanship this incoming year, we will watch a video covering the overview of the T20 under Indonesia's presidency. Let's have a look.
Initiated by the Mexican G20 presidency, the T20 or better known as the T20, was formally established in February 2012 in Mexico City, where think tank representatives from 15 countries came together to discuss the Mexican G20 presidency in the run-up to the leaders' meeting in Los Cabos. As the G20's official engagement group that is responsible for connecting and collaborating with regional and international think tanks, the T20 serves as an ideal bank, bringing together experts from the most relevant think tanks and research centers worldwide to provide, facilitate, and communicate research-based policy recommendations to the G20. To develop policy recommendations for the G20, the T20 Indonesia is supported by 9 task forces that will cover 1. Open trade and sustainable investment, 2. Digital connectivity, cybersecurity and inclusivity, 3. Governing climate target, energy transition and environmental protection, 4. Food security and sustainable agriculture, 5. Inequality, human capital and well-being, 6. Global health security and COVID-19, 7. International finance and economic recovery, 8. Resilient infrastructure and financing, 9. Global cooperation for SDGs financing. During its presidency, the T20 Indonesia will have 2 major events: Inception Conference in February 2022 and the T20 Summit in September 2022. Side events are expected to be held between February and August 2022. The national coordinators of the T20 Indonesia are Institute for Economic and Social Research, University of Indonesia and Center for Strategic and International Studies. Both are think tanks that play an important role in policy design through policy-oriented research.
Now we are nearing the end of the handover event. I would like to invite the Honorable Bapak Raden Edi Priopambudi, Co-Sherpa of the G20 Indonesia, to deliver his remarks. Bapak Edi has served as the advisor of the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs on Connectivity, Service Development and Natural Resources since 2020, with the task of providing recommendations on strategic issues to the Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Since 2021, Bapak Edi has been assigned as co-Sherpa of G20 Indonesia and daily coordinator for Sherpa track for the presidency of the G20 Indonesia 2022. I would like to invite His Excellency Bapak Edi to take over the screen. Over to you, Pak.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone in Europe, and also good evening to those joining from Jakarta. I acknowledge my colleagues who are present in this virtual forum. Dr. Fahad, Chair of the T20 for Saudi Arabia. Assalamualaikum. And then Professor Paolo Magri, Chair of the T20 Italy. Buongiorno. And Professor Bambang, and also Professor Cisman Simanjunta, and also my colleagues from the GSIS, Dr. Jose, selamat malam. First of all, congratulations to the Italian government for concluding the G20 presidency last month. Grazie. Indonesia is ready to continue the tradition of leading the G20 guided by the spirits of inclusiveness and collaboration. Pleased to meet you again. I hope that we stay safe and healthy in this challenging situation. My gratitude to T20 Indonesia and Italy for organizing and inviting me in this meeting. The Indonesian presidency will commence on December 1st, 2021, which is tomorrow. As the G20 established practice, Indonesia has joined the leaderships of the G20 Troika together with our colleagues, Italy and India, or I may call the triple I, after triple Ps in Italy. Indonesia is honored to take over the G20 presidency next year and continue many of the great works Italy has done. Indonesia presidency will adopt the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger to encourage joint efforts for world's economic recovery. Our logo also implies togetherness. This theme underscores Indonesia's hope and preparedness to participate in global partnerships and joint efforts to overcome the impact of the pandemic and restore global confidence. Indonesia is of the view that for a stronger recovery, collaboration is urgently needed. Bringing the spirits of Recover Together, Recover Stronger, there are three key areas that will drive our presidency as follows. Global health architectures, by advancing global fundraising, resilience, and harmonized global health standards. Number two is digital and economy transformation, by restoring the global economy governance redesign with digital technology. The third is energy transition, by promoting a global cleaner energy system and just transition. In resolving current unbalanced situation and accelerating the achievement, Indonesia aims to bring collective concrete action to lower ground, rather than narrative outcomes, through those three topics as a comprehensive exit strategy to support recovery. In this light, collaboration and role of scientists is very essential to explore and contribute in those topics into a concrete actions and deliverables. I acknowledge that the think tank T20 has also been branching a very fruitful discussion in many task forces, including global health, climate, SDGs, and many more. There are essential aspects and contributions that may be generated by the role of T20 and scholars, such as, but not limited to, 1, producing studies and analysis can help to advance the adoption of energy transition technology that is affordable and accessible for all. Number 2, strengthening research and development in health technology by spearheading innovation to resolve imbalances and inequality in pandemic recovery. Number 3, expanding sectors that can be digitalized, especially in enhancing inclusion for MSMEs to be integrated to global market and resolving supply chain disruption. Indonesia stands ready to exert global leaderships to secure the strategic international and national goals required as a prerequisite for a strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive post-pandemic economic growth. To respond, Professor Paulo and Professor Gisman mentioned, Sherpa will always work together with engagement groups, including T20, an open opportunity to bring recommendation to leaders. And the spirit of together, Sherpa track and finance track agenda framework has been aligned, all together engagement groups priorities issues. With the support of other G20 members, we hope to walk the talk, make the G20 lead the world by example. The Indonesia G20 presidency hope to realign our vision and goals again. It is never too late for us to heal the world together for the children that are about to inherit the world from us. Thank you very much and welcome you to Indonesia.
Thank you, Pak Edi, for leaving us with such optimistic remarks despite these challenging and uncertain times ahead of us. We are confident that T20 Indonesia will set a new bar to accomplish common goals and resolve common challenges with concrete, feasible, and actionable proposals. But of course, that will require support and collaboration from everyone in the community. Now, I would like to invite Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri and Ibu Riatu Mariatul Kiptia, the executive co-chairs of the T20 Indonesia, to announce the call for abstract and to deliver the closing remarks. Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri is the head of the Department of Economics, Center for Strategic and International Studies. His research activities focus on international trade, regional integration, and globalization of value chain. While Ibu Riatu Mariatul Kiptia has been the director of LPEM FEB UI since 2016. She is a faculty member in the Economics Department, University of Indonesia. Without further ado, let's hear from Pak Yose and Ibu Riatu. First from Pak Yose, followed by Ibu Riatu. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Biondi. Pak Edi Priyo, co-chair Pak G20 Indonesia, Dr. Pahat, Paulo, Pak Bambang, Pak Jisman, Ibu Riatu, and Antonio, as well as distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening from Jakarta. I'm really delighted that this first official event of T20 Indonesia has just taken place. It marked the beginning of the involvement of Research Institute in Indonesia to organize our contribution, the contribution of think tanks from all over the world in the G20 process. The time of Indonesia's presidency cannot be more timely. We have seen the indications of economic recovery, with the economic growing quite strongly, as mentioned by Pak Bambang and Pak Jisman as well. But we also know that the economic growth mostly occurs in only some parts of the world, while many other parts of the world remain to be uncertain. At the same time, we've also seen that the pandemic is not over yet. New variants could still emerge and jeopardize the prospect of recovery. Uneven access to vaccines make the risk of having new and more contagious variants is even higher. So it is the responsibility of G20 member countries actually to guide and to support stronger, inclusive, and sustainable recovery. Indonesia, as the country that is in the driver's seat of this process, has a very strategic position to promote such recovery, as it is reflected in the theme of recover stronger, recover together. It would not be an easy task for sure, considering that the G20 is not a homogeneous group, but rather to have very diverse interests and diverse agenda. The challenges is even higher because even if this pandemic is under control, we are still going to have many other longer-term issues, from those accelerated digital transformation, transition to greener economy, or addressing inequality. But I believe that Indonesia can drive the process by trying to focus the attention to various important issues and to serve as a bridge to connect various and often different interests from member countries. Therefore, in my opinion, the role of T20 next year would also be quite strategic. As an idea bank to the G20, T20 provide ideas and innovative recommendations to G20 process, not only for the ongoing agendas, but also to give directions for various important agendas that has not been discussed under G20. In T20, in Indonesia, under T20 Indonesia, we would like to facilitate that exchange of ideas among researchers and scholars from all over the world, so that we can have and promote discussions, as well as to provide evidence-based recommendations to communicate it to the policymakers and also to the leaders of G20. Therefore, we would like to invite all of you, researchers, scholars from all over the world, to take active participations in this T20 process and to discuss possible solutions to ever-growing global issues. My colleague Riyatu would like to discuss more about our activities to facilitate such discussion. Screen to you, Riyatu.
Thank you, Jose. Hello, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and greetings from Jakarta. Following what have been shared by Jose on overview of T20 Indonesia, on behalf of T20 Indonesia, we would like to invite all of you to participate in the discussion and all of T20 activities, in which one of them is through T20 policy brief abstract submission. We look forward to collaborating with you from global and domestic think tanks, as well as with multilateral and regional organizations in our T20 process. The T20, as one of 10 engagement group of G20, we are aiming to contribute the research-based action to the G20 initiative, the SERPA, as well as the finance tech, that in effect may work in mitigating health, social, and economic setbacks due to pandemic COVID-19 and do strengthening multilateral cooperation on sustainable development. We are opening call for policy brief abstract up to January 10, 2022 for the 9 task force of the T20 Indonesia. The informations and policy areas of each task force are available at T20 website link at info.t20indonesia.org. This call for policy brief abstract will be a start of our T20 various activities and engagement with all of you. The selected abstract will be presented in the T20 Inception Seminar at February 9 and 10, 2022. The discussion and engagement in T20 activities will also involve various task force activities, including also global associated T20 events, as in the case of Global Solutions Summit by GSI, Global Policy Forum by ISP and TCPP, and Global Dialogue by CSIS. The final forum will be T20 Summit at 23 and 24 September 2022 that will function to share T20 communique and discuss T20 recommendation extracting from T20 policy brief. We, CSIS and LPM FEBUI as the T20 Indonesia organizer also receive support from other national think tanks and university as task force host institution, which are SCCIC, Smart City and Community Innovation Center, Institute of Technology Bandung, CPIS, Center for Indonesian Policy Study, Smeru Research Institute, CHAMS, Center for Health Administration and Policy Study, University of Indonesia, and P2EB Research Centers of Faculty of Economics and Business, Gajah Mada University. The next year will be an exciting year in which we will closely cooperate, relearning, and engage with the vast think tank network. In this regard, we thank you to all of you that have been in contact and share insight to us for the T20 activities preparation, and we are open for all the input for those T20 Indonesia activities. We are hopeful that with these current and future supports, the T20 can continue contribute to the G20 and stay relevant for its various stakeholders. Thank you. Over to you, Biondi.
Thank you, Pak Yosa dan Ibu Riyatu for the closing announcement, and we are very excited for the call of abstract. Looking forward to receiving innovative ideas from all the T20 communities. And that brings us to the end of this handover event. And on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank everyone for your great enthusiasm and engagement throughout this event. If you are missing the earlier part of this event, the recording of this session is available from CSIS Indonesia YouTube channel. We also invite you to follow our Twitter account at T20 Solutions with an S, T20 Solutions, and on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, T20 Indonesia 2022. all three with the same account name, T20 Indonesia 2022. Keep us engaged with your thoughts, concerns, and ideas for the betterment of T20 contribution to the G20 Indonesia's agenda. Recover together, recover stronger. While this handover event is ending, the work on ideas and furthering collective actions have just begun. My name is Biondi Simo from Indonesia, and on behalf of the team and everyone involved in this program, we thank you for your participation, and we're looking forward to having you again in our incoming T20 engagements throughout the year. Until then, please stay safe, goodbye, and see you soon, everyone.
Thank you for everything. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, Antonio. Terima kasih, Pak Edi.